Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this conference. I would much rather be there in person, as I'm sure you can imagine. Unfortunately, that's not possible, and so I am, as Nigel said, a remote presenter, but remote physically, hopefully close at hand in terms of our thoughts and our services to the Caribbean. I've got about 15-20 minutes, and I promise not to overrun because you've got an awful lot of other things to do. My name is Peter Davies, and as Nigel said, I'm the Global Ambassador for an organisation called Get Safe Online. I'll tell you a little bit more about our involvement in the Caribbean later, but for the moment, suffice to say that Get Safe Online is an organisation that provides freely accessible public information and awareness about online safety. Why we do it will become apparent from the things I'm about to say. And towards the end of the presentation, I will just mention the project we're involved in, which is delivering the same service as we do in the UK to 12 countries in the Caribbean. I may have had the pleasure of meeting one or two of you previously, in which case it's good to renew acquaintance by any means. To those who haven't met me before, we're a UK-based organisation. My previous history includes working in cybersecurity as a law enforcement, and also since then working in a few places around the world in cybersecurity. So, what am I here to say? Three key things, really. And if only I could get this working, you would see what the three key things are. Excuse me a moment. Okay, there they go. Point one, cybersecurity is first and foremost about human beings, not technology. I'll explore this in a couple of examples in a moment. But my point here is that, of course, there are formidable technical solutions that are part of cybersecurity, whether it's for an individual, an organization, or indeed a nation. But my point is that you cannot ignore the human factor in any aspect of cybersecurity. And in actual fact, it's often the human factor that can be the biggest failing or the biggest success. I'll come on to the other points in a moment, but first let me develop that. Here we go. My first example of how cybersecurity is about humans actually is the F-22 Raptor jet, launched in 2007 to a great fanfare by the United States at a cost of a cool $150 million each. And the special thing about this particular aircraft, or one of the special things, was it was loaded with the latest computer technology. Absolutely loaded to the gills with everything, and it could fly itself and fight itself. On the 11th of February 2007, during the early stages of its operational use, 12 F-22s failed mid-flight between Hawaii and Japan. And they failed because of a major software fault which crashed the navigation and communication systems on each of those planes. Well, in theory, the failure was a software failure, but it actually arose from the fact that the planes were flying across the international line in the wrong direction. And somebody had forgotten to program the software and program the planes to understand it would be okay if in certain circumstances the clock tripped back by 24 hours. If it wasn't actually for the fact that support vessels and support craft close at hand, it might have been a tragedy of massive proportions. As it was a glitch and an embarrassment. But my thesis is it wasn't a technical glitch, it was a human failure to design the technology well enough. Another example, closer to home for me, I was living in London in 2011. And as you will see from this sad picture of part of central London, there were some very serious riots. My point here is that actually it seems more convenient often to blame the technology than to blame human beings. And curiously, during the London 11, a lot of the press coverage focused not on the underlying social concern or on who was responsible for the riots or happening again. nor indeed on the law enforcement activity. They actually focused on the fact that rioters were messaging each other via BlackBerry, to the point where the coverage pretty much suggested that the BlackBerry was to blame for the riots, which is a classic way of appalling technology and failing to understand the human in the system that actually makes the difference. So the technology obviously needs fixing. The technology works. The technology can amplify, multiply, and do all kinds of things with human activity. But ultimately, it still reflects human activity. It doesn't direct it. It doesn't drive it. These are historical examples. Let me use another, a bit more current, not just in the Caribbean, but around the world. And this is about the human mindset, about understanding cybersecurity. Now, the fact is that any strategy to tackle cybersecurity needs to start with a firm understanding of what is happening out there and what the threats actually are. The problem is that actually at the present time, a lot of organizations, a lot of countries possibly have an approach of either not wanting to listen to what's going on out there, what the reality of cybersecurity threats as they individuals and countries, or not perhaps having invested in the capacity and capability to listen particularly well. And the problem with that is simply not listening and not having good, valid reporting processes that are used energetically and people are to use, means that we are blindsiding ourselves as to an understanding of what the cybersecurity phenomena actually are. Clearly, the better mindset, and of course, see this, is to listen carefully. And I have seen some really good examples of excellent reporting systems and understanding that the need is there to drive reporting, to accept that it may look as if the problem's getting bigger, when what actually is bigger is the ability to understand the problem and then respond. And of course, if we lose the mindset of not listening and start encouraging the reporting of cybersecurity issues and then turn those reports into intelligence, lo and behold, what do we get? We start getting some we start getting wins, and we start defeating some of the cybersecurity threats that face us. I don't know where that photo came from. I understand it was some sporting event recently. I don't really understand these things. Here's another example, and I hopefully I've made my point already, but I will just show this example as well. This is, some of you may recognize this. This is about WannaCry, which arguably the most successful and most widespread ransomware attack that really took in 2017 and affected a number of organizations around the world. Is the ransom screen that would pop up if you unfortunately have to be a victim of WannaCry, and basically saying you can't access your files unless you pay, and the clock is ticking. You can see from the numbers on the left. Now, this affected an awful lot of organizations, and it affected the worldwide. My recollection in 2017 is of WannaCry severely affecting the UK's National Health Service. I remember it because my son was in hospital at the time, and they basically revert to paper systems. And you can imagine if you have a loved one who is in intensive care, receiving a lot of treatment, needing all the data about their case and their recent x-rays to be assembled and analysed by doctors in quick time, what it's like to realise that people can't use their computers, have to go back to paper. Obviously, WannaCry was a successful technical means of exacting ransom, and it's one of the best known. But actually, I would argue that, again, WannaCry human failing. WannaCry worked best with organizations and systems that had outdated Microsoft Windows technology, technology that was actually no longer supported by Microsoft. It was that old. And so actually the vulnerability of the UK's National Health Service to WannaCry was really dictated by the act of ransomware itself, but it was defenseless because somebody had decided it was okay not to upgrade the software and okay to spend the money on something else instead. Now, I'm not being critical of whoever made that decision, but my point is again that underneath the surface of cybersecurity, however technical, however computer-based it looks, human beings, human errors, human vulnerabilities, human weaknesses, and human flaws run through it like a river. So here's the next thing. I don't think you can achieve cybersecurity. You can have the best technology in the world, but unless you accompany it with a cybersecurity culture, a way of doing things around cybersecurity that is a norm, is the way that people get things done, you can't achieve cybersecurity. The best technical defenses in the world will not ultimately protect you. And how do you achieve a cybersecurity culture? Well, I'm not going to go into a talk about culture. I've been to business school, albeit briefly, and everyone's got their view about how you create a culture. What I am here to say, though, is that public awareness and education is the most important building block of an effective cybersecurity culture. Don't just take my word for it. Don't just think, well, that's only common sense. This is also increasingly the established doctrine. Even the cybersecurity experts will tell you that without proper cultural management, education, and awareness raising, cybersecurity is not achievable. There are loads of models for this. I'm going to choose one here. And if you're interested in this model, it's quite well used. I think it's used in about 40 different countries around the world. It's run by the Oxford Cybersecurity Centre. And if you get a copy of this slide, you will find a link to it just underneath the title element. But the point is, they've developed a cybersecurity capacity maturity model for nations. They've modeled what makes a nation cyber secure. And there are 5 different dimensions of it, 2 of which involve public education and awareness. And the list of different headings is there. And actually, if you count the number of different elements of what this learned body consider to be a proper cybersecurity provision for a country, a quarter of the entire thing is about public education and awareness and the culture that will arise. It's not about the strategy, it's not about the resourcing, it's not about the technology, it's just about making people aware. And here's my take on what you can achieve through effective education and awareness. And at tactical level, of course, you can actually let people know how they might be vulnerable. The fact is, in many parts of the world, people don't know how vulnerable they are. And of course, that simply aggravates their vulnerability. People have no authoritative, independent place to learn about it. And people desperately need to be told of the mistakes they can make online and how to protect themselves. So education and awareness, as well as making people realize the risks, can inform them about how to protect themselves and protect each other. And obviously, cybersecurity, I would argue, has parallels in personal life and business life. If you're concerned about a teenage relative or an elderly relative getting caught up in some kind of scam or other kind of threat online, there are parallels to be drawn in those things and the kind of threats that might affect your organization, your public service. So this is not just about people looking after themselves, it's about enabling them to look after each other. And of course, once you've learnt what the risks are, actually you can learn better how to protect the people you work for, the people you work with, and the people you serve. Another important element of education awareness is that actually, just as general awareness on cybersecurity is not that strong across the board, awareness of the legislation that applies actually isn't that strong. Some people may need to be informed that certain things are criminal offences and will be dealt with as such. Part of my background was in dealing with the appalling crime of the distribution of indecent images of children online. A curious feature of this was, of course, that where children took in, as they did sometimes, indecent photos of themselves and circulated friends online, technically they were also committing that offence. What matters, of course, is not criminalising a load of people who are just a bit misguided. What matters is making them realise that there are serious harms involved, and the backup of law to deter them from putting themselves at risk can be very important. I think there are more things that education and awareness can do as well. And this isn't just about protecting people, it's helping people to be confident. There are huge gains to be made in the Caribbean as elsewhere by increasing the number of digital citizens, increasing the number of people who access government services and financial services online. One can only achieve those goals if people are confident to do so. And if people are wary of the risks and aren't helped to get to grips with them, aren't helped to realize the benefits of the digital life, they will deny themselves that opportunity. And of course, in doing so, the services that exist to help will not be able to help them in the efficient and arguably more productive way that digital operation offers. Here's another thing I think that we maybe overlook. You're all cybersecurity professionals, you're cyber aware business people and officials, but there's another generation that's got to come. And with the development of technology at the rate it develops, it's important that we think about how we bring on the next generation of cybersecurity professionals and start people in thinking about cybersecurity and realizing the benefits. I think that's a significant longer-term benefit. Another longer-term benefit is actually strategic decision makers, people in immense positions of power, people making those critical decisions, need to have the same amount of cybersecurity awareness as everybody else. It's really difficult sometimes to admit there are stuff you don't know, and actually making sure that people in the position of making significant strategic decisions affecting a whole country or a whole community, it's important they have the awareness they need to make sure decisions are the right ones. And my final thought on this is actually the internet has been, pretty much its entire existence, of a moral vacuum. You can find all kinds of things on there that arguably would be much less easy to go on in the analog world, in real life, as people of my age tend to call it. And I think it's really important to set, it's important to create a moral framework, an ethical framework that tells people what's okay, what kind of online behaviors are all right, and what kind of online behaviors aren't. And my view is that in a moral vacuum, it's far easier for people to be vulnerable and maybe harm others than when it's made very clear about what's right and what's wrong. So I think education and awareness has a simple level of operation towards the top of that list, just helping people realize how they can be vulnerable, helping them figure out what to do about it. But I actually think it has more profound effects as well, and those can often be overlooked. My basic message is, please don't forget about public education awareness in the course of thinking about cybersecurity. Please realize there's a human element at every stage that needs to be taken into account. For those countries represented at this event, who are among the 12 we're serving, you may have heard this before, but I just want to mention our project for a moment. What Get Safe Online does in the UK, and has done for about 15 years, is deliver that kind of education awareness that we believe helps people. We have a freely accessible, which is very popular, very authoritative, well written and well presented, and that's free to access for anybody in the UK. And we also back that up with key messages, PR campaigns, making sure that people who maybe don't mind because they don't think of their safety enough, they get some key messages too, and their awareness is raised, and they start consulting the website and looking for advice about how to stay safe. Our project, in brief, is to deliver exactly those services to the 12 Caribbean countries that are part of the Commonwealth of Nations. It's funded by the UK Commonwealth Cybersecurity Programme and builds on the Commonwealth Cyber Declaration that was made following the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in April 2018. And what we are now doing in 12 countries is delivering our services. If you're in one of those countries, with one or two temporary exceptions, you already have your own version of the Get Safe Online website. It's up and running. It looks and feels like it belongs to your country, because that's how it needs to be. It looks and feels accessible. It's been developed with advice from you or your colleagues to make sure the messaging is right, to make sure the presentation is right. And during the course of the year, as that unfolds, we're also going to carry out 2 PR campaigns, again, mirroring what succeeds for us in the UK, bringing key messages to the attention of a wider audience who may not think enough about their online security and may not understand the need to go to our website and read the advice there. So we've been involved in quite a lot of engagement work. I had the privilege of meeting the CTU, including Nigel, during March in Trinidad, and we're very keen to make sure that with the duration of our project, we have the maximum impact on raising levels of public education and awareness about cybersecurity across the Caribbean. Our ambition is that people become confident and safe internet users because they've learned safe behaviors online, because we help to make them that way. Wherever else they get their information, we want to contribute to the work going on in countries to educate the public and make them aware. We've got a couple of other ambitions I want to share with you. We don't like the idea of delivering our service for a year and then packing up and leaving. We're going to look for ways of sustaining our service beyond the end of the project, because frankly, the need for high quality education and awareness will not stop on the 31st of March 2020. And we're very keen to expand our service. We have funding for the 12 Caribbean countries that are part of the Commonwealth of Nations, but our list of clients we'd like to serve does not stop there. And clearly, we would very much like to extend our service to other parts of the Caribbean if we can find a way of doing it. So that's the presentation in a nutshell. I hope that's been useful. It's hard to start day 2 of a conference. Thanks for joining me for the presentation. And I'll have a few minutes just to take any questions before the event moves on. So back to you. And again, many thanks for the opportunity to present, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Peter. Did you mention who are the 12 Caribbean countries?
Do you know what? I dread people asking me that because I've got a memory like a sieve. But I will try and rattle them off. Bahamas, Belize, Antigua and Barbuda, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Guyana, Grenada. We hope to be working in Trinidad and Tobago very shortly. I expect some of you have been counting. Have I got to 12 yet, or have I still got to think of a couple more?
You got to 10.
Okay, right. Well, if you give me a moment, I'll get myself to 12. This is highly embarrassing for me, and I should have prepared.
What about Dominica or?
Yes, Dominica. Thank you. Apologies to anybody from Dominica there. I had a fantastic there. And please don't take the fact that you slipped my mind.
St. Kitts and Nevis, maybe?
I think I mentioned St. Kitts and Nevis. Let me just check. Barbados. How could I forget?
Barbados, right, Barbados. That's what it is, yeah.
Apologies to anybody from those 2 countries. I really should have prepared better. Thank you for the question.
All right. We can take any questions or comments from the room for Peter. You? Yeah, Mike. Just a second, Peter. I think we have one comment at least.
Deirdre Williams from St. Lucia. Thank you very much for your presentation. Rudy Daniel brought to our attention on Civic when you launched in St. Vincent, and I congratulated him because I thought it was a Vincentian project, and he replied that it was a Commonwealth project, and I believe about the next day or so it popped up in St. Lucia, and it is a very good and useful idea, so thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much for the comment. There are a lot of parts of the world that would benefit from this service. We've tried to reach out to countries and do the launches in a kind of coordinated way. I would have been worried, very worried, if you had ended up saying you haven't heard anything from us yet. So thank you for reassuring me. Rest assured that we are determined through the rest of 11 months, not just to make people aware that we're there, but also get those key messages out. And we want to target particularly people and an older generation who may not be digital native in that process. But thank you for your comments, and I'm glad we're welcome, and we're proud to serve you, as we are proud to serve all those countries.
Any other questions or comments from the room? Well, I'm not seeing any, Peter, so I'll say thank you very much for the presentation, and I guess people will get in contact with you as might be required.
Absolutely, and if anybody wants to get in contact with us, then absolutely. Nigel has our details, and you'll find. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you.